This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics. We promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Jens-Fabian Goetzmann, Head of Product at RevenueCat. Jens, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Thanks, Art.
Great, thank you for coming this cold winter, late January 2022, believe it or not. Okay, let's set the stage for the conversation first. Here's the thing. Even if you aren't into tech, you can see Apple Incorporated being mentioned in the news pretty much on a daily basis. These days, a big chunk of that coverage is dedicated to the situation around Apple's monopoly with its App Store. And one of the central figures in that store is in-app purchases. A quick recap of how app developers have been making money with apps over the years. Well, it all started back in 2008 when app developers were being paid for each copy of the apps they sold, or they could provide it for free but display ads to the app users and make money that way. Later on, in-app purchases came along as the way for app developers to make money on extra features inside the apps, or provide an option to turn off advertising inside apps for a small fee. And of course, later on, app subscriptions became a big part of the app monetization options app developers could choose from. Now, when Apple introduced the App Store, a big appeal for app developers was that Apple said, you will be charging only 30% of each copies being sold. At that point, if you're in software business and you wanted, let's say, release a game on a console, you would have to pay way more than the 30% Apple was asking for. For a while, everybody thought it was a fair deal and developers were happy. Fast forward to present days, years later of struggling to achieve visibility for their apps and actually making money, many app developers aren't that optimistic anymore, and especially if your business is the size of the Epic Games studio. To give you a comprehensive picture of what's going on and what are implications for you, we have Jens. But let's talk about you, Jens, first, as we always do on this show. Talk about yourself. What brought you to the world of apps?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Art. So in comparison to some of my colleagues at RevenueCat, I've been somewhat late to the app party, as it were. So I really kind of first fell in love with mobile as a consumer. Well, I was already working on tech, but not kind of on mobile apps. So really, I started getting into the kind of app development, app publisher side only in 2017 when I joined the fitness app 8Fit. I kind of on the product side there was first responsible for product growth. So I was, very much kind of thinking about in-app purchases, subscriptions, monetization, upsells, and so on. Then later on, I was head of product there. And because I, had kind of learned about all the pain points with managing subscriptions, purchases, and all of that, I joined RevenueCat last year, and have been working on that side, on kind of the service provider side ever since.
Right. So you had third-hand experience with in-app purchases, all troubles, all headaches you can have when it's not being set up right. And so RevenueCat service was kind of a good fit for your internal experience. You became part of the team quite naturally.
Yes, exactly.
We actually had David Barnard from your team back in November 2020. Now it feels like it was years ago. It was just a year and a half ago, but it's been a while. And please, could you just refresh the memory of our audience? What is RevenueCat? What do you guys do? And do you have a cat on staff?
Well, we're all cats in a way, and we have some cats with pet cats, I guess. But yeah. So what does RevenueCat do? RevenueCat, I would say, like in a in one line, we do subscription infrastructure as a service. And I kind of think about our product as having three parts. The first part is the SDK or the SDKs. So we provide SDKs for iOS and Android, and also for various hybrid technologies like React Native and Flutter and so on. And the SDK essentially sits between the app and the store and facilitates making transactions in a way that is, to some extent a bit easier than using the native platform APIs, but also, especially if you're on multiple platforms, is kind of consistent across different platforms. Second part is the backend. The backend basically normalizes subscription status and lifecycle across all the different platforms that we support, which right now is, of course, iOS and Google Play, but then also Amazon App Store and Stripe for web subscriptions. And therefore, we can basically serve as a single source of the truth, especially if you offer subscriptions on different platforms. That's really useful. The backend then allows interacting with that data in various ways through, an API, through integrations. For example, we can send data to product analytics tools like Amplitude, for example, or to MMPs like AppsFlyer, all kinds of ways to basically integrate that data, like the event stream with third parties. But you can also get the data directly via ETL. And then the last part of the product is our dashboard, which basically enables you managing your subscriber base, both like the individual subscribers and their history, as well as kind of getting an overview of the overall state of the subscription business, things like revenue, conversion rates, basically all the insights that you need to look at how your subscription business is doing and kind of how to improve that. So that's, maybe in a nutshell what Revenue Cat does.
All right. So from what I'm hearing, you guys have been doing life of a lot of web developers way easier, so they can really focus on the functionality features of the app and
absolutely
helping them to make money. Actually, the reason why they're getting into business, I still remember the numbers from research done a few years ago. There's only very tiny portions of web developers who came into this business as a hobbyists who are not making money with apps. They just love to tinker with code. That's it. But these guys are in the minority. The bulk part, the huge chunk of web developer community, 99% are in the business to make money.
And I would argue, like, regardless of whether you're trying to make money or you're just tinkering, building out a subscription infrastructure is not a lot of fun either way. It's like 10,000s of lines of code that, you're not like, that's not what any app developer really kind of started developing apps for. So that's where we come in, and, all of this boilerplate code that otherwise everybody basically has to write. We take that away and just make it really awesome and reliable. So yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Got it. Okay. So let's begin the conversation about in-app purchases with kind of a recap of the recent updates with Apple, what I mentioned in the intro. So what's going on?
Cool. So I'll focus on some of the most important milestones and kind of mostly the status quo as it is now. Just a lot of stuff has happened last year, and kind of start in April, where the EU in the Spotify case basically said it found that Apple has acted anti-competitively. And this was basically just notice to Apple that this is what they found. There haven't been no remedies have been announced yet, but that's kind of one of the cases to keep watching. Then in August, there was a law passed in South Korea that mandates third-party payment processors, and both Apple and Google have since said that they will comply, but will charge commissions and on those external payments. Then we had in September, a bunch of things happened in September. Firstly, there was a settlement between Apple and the Japan Free Trade Commissions, a commission which allows reader apps to a single link out to external payments and account management. So reader apps are basically things like Spotify, Netflix, Kindle, where you access some kind of content, a content subscription that you've made elsewhere. Also in September, then we had the injunction in the Epic versus Apple trial that you alluded to earlier. So in the injunction basically was the result of that, the court case, which now both parties have appealed, was basically that the judge sided with Apple on almost all sides of on almost all claims. But the judge also issued this injunction saying that Apple would have to allow linking out to third-party payments. As I mentioned, both parties appealed, and the injunction then kind of got stayed in the last minute by the appeals court. So it's right now pending appeals, which could take months, essentially. Then in October, Apple announced that it will officially allow messaging customers outside of the app about third-party payments methods. So this is basically, emailing people to subscribe on the web, for example. Mm-hmm. And then the very, very most recent developments have been in the Netherlands, where the Dutch competition regulator ruled that Apple must allow dating apps to use third-party payment methods. Apple then proposed a solution that was a bit complicated, which would have entailed submitting different binaries, paying a commission to Apple, and I think it was just yesterday, just a couple of days ago, the regulator then said, no, we're not happy with that solution. We're going to fine you 5 million euros a week until you have a better solution. So it's kind of pending what's going to happen there. So yeah, in summary, lots of decisions, lots of movements, but also lots of pending developments, but we don't yet know what exactly the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, so given the average kind of a length of the case in the court, we can expect month-to-month litigations back and forth between Apple and the companies who are trying to, either the companies or the regulation bodies from countries to actually shift the Apple's policy on the App Store one way or the other.
Yes.
But having said all that, let's talk about, I can imagine developers like all of us have been hearing this news, kind of a peripheral vision in the background. But let's make the case. What kind of implications for them specifically from all those developments?
Yeah, so I think basically the headline is that for now, most developers, most app publishers that are currently or have been mandated to use in-app purchases will continue to have to use in-app purchases. And there's, maybe kind of a lot of these regulations are kind of chipping away at the edges, but like at the heart of it, there's really no way around in-app purchases for most apps, like most kind of digital contents, digital experiences today. I think the only meaningful carve out that we have right now is this Reader app exception on the Apple side, and so like if you're Spotify or Netflix or Kindle or whatever, then that might be really relevant to you, and you're probably thinking about like how to make best use of that. But for everyone else, it's mostly just noise, right? So like let's for example talk about South Korea. Unless you like have somehow super large proportion of your user base in South Korea, or your revenue coming from South Korea, it's very, very unlikely that's going to make any meaningful dent, especially if you're also going to get charged a commission. And the same thing is going to hold in the Netherlands. So I think we see a bit of a kind of what I've called the balkanization of the App Store rules, where we'll have more and more different rules applying in different places. But that just means that like the lowest common denominator in the end is what's still going to apply everywhere. And that means in-app purchases are just going to remain a best practice. I think the one exception that I mentioned above, I think is good that Apple has clarified being able to message users outside of the app about external payments. To be clear, a lot of app developers have been doing that all along. And there was, kind of this, the Apple's rules on this went back and forth. And it's good that they've now clarified that this is allowed, because Apple couldn't really police that before in any case.
That's just impossible.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you police whether you get an email after 2 weeks or whatever? App review is not going to catch that. So, it's good that that's clarified. And that does mean that web payments can be of interest in some use cases for app developers. But, I think that's kind of it's more for specific use cases.
Right. I think it will be useful to get back quickly on the initial, the pros, the plus side of Apple providing the App Store as a platform, as a concept. So for app developers, that was a way to get a distribution channel, and the whole Apple was backing up the trustworthiness of a relationship between app users and the developers. So developer was kind of he could just rely on Apple to convincing the app users that their money will be safe, their data, their personal data, their financial data will be safe, because this is Apple, the company they've been trusting for years. For app developers, it was a kind of making their life easier from a financial standpoint of view. And net purchase, this is the part of that mechanism. So to me, it feels like, for the most part, not big guys like, and the Epic Games, obviously they're talking about in a different scale, different amount of money.
And also different
for small guys. It would be just easier go along with the net purchases and still taking advantage of the benefits. You don't have to convince your app users that you're not going to be stealing their money, because they're seeing you for the first time when they're approaching your brand. How do you expect them to trust you right away? They know Apple. They've been trusting the iTunes, buying books, music, movies, TV shows, whatever. And apps just part of that ecosystem, right?
Yeah. And I think if you're Epic, you also have a different kind of loyalty, right? I mean, they're like loyal fans of like Epic Games and whatever, right? That, you have some of that customer loyalty there that can overcome some of that, that extra friction. I mean, because I think that, to me, it's like, trust is one. There's like several aspects there that speak for in-app purchases. Trust is one. And, one, it's not just about like your data being safe, but it's also, I know that I can like manage my subscriptions, for example, from a central place in the App Store, right? I know how to, I can easily cancel without a problem, right? There's not going to be any hassles or problems with that. And then lastly, it's also the friction, like it's really, really easy to make an in-app purchase, right? I mean, you basically like tap a button and that's it, right? So no entering credit card details, like, no extra steps, no 3D secure verification, whatever, it's just like, it's just going to go through immediately. And, that's the beauty of it. And like, frankly, any other means of payment is going to have trouble, with all of these added like friction points, added kind of, detractors from the conversion rate are going to have a hard time competing even at 30%, with the commission that Apple charges. So, I think that's something where, sometimes it can be easy to just think, everything else would be better with a different means of payment. But, there's definitely lots of things that speak against that.
Right. And I guess just a quick small point on this question would be, we're living in a world where security becomes more and more important as we have more and more breaches, ransomware, stolen data, selling. It's a kind of a nightmarish world when you do need to have a reliable supplier for software you can trust in terms of security as well. On top of the features you're looking for, the use case, you're going to be using a specific app in your life, but how you can trust that your data will be safe and financial data as well. So in this equation, I guess Apple still has advantage. We know that even their software firewall, I should say, is not impenetrable. You can still break it, but chances are they have a more power to combat the hacking as opposed to small guys.
Absolutely.
Okay, switching the gears a little bit, let's talk about web payments. So World Wide Web is still there. It's not going anywhere. So how viable and effective this kind of payments for app developers? What are the pros and cons?
Cool. So I already kind of started talking about this a little bit just now, right? Because when we talk about the advantages of in-app purchases, there's also some of the disadvantages of web payments. So we need to be clear that like web payments are not for everyone. So I mean, as I mentioned, you probably have to support in-app purchases anyway. And then there's a few kind of drawbacks of web payments that you really have to take into account. The lower conversion rate I already mentioned. And I think one thing that's worth noting is sometimes in like initial experiments, what people do is they kind of send their highest intent users to the web and then see like good conversion rates and believe that somehow will balance out. But you should note that if you only send your highest intent users to the web, then yes, your conversion rates are going to be higher, but they would have been higher in the app as well, right? So make sure that if you're drawing comparisons, you compare like similar user groups as well. Low conversion rates I already mentioned. The second point is higher complexity, and that's kind of on different levels. I mean, it's there are of course providers like Stripe that make it relatively easy to charge credit cards, but it's still an entirely new tech stack that you're building up there. Different technology, higher complexity also in the sense of you now will need to basically manage subscriptions across different platforms. Even if you're just on one platform today, because you want web subscriptions to be honored in your app. That's also higher complexity there. That's means that the investment part of kind of an ROI calculation is definitely high. And then lastly, one point that people tend to forget is that you also suddenly have to have tax obligations because you're not charging people directly. You need to charge VAT or sales tax, and you need to charge them and then also pay them, which can be kind of quite a lot of administrative burden there, which is one of the nice things with the stores that Apple and Google basically, do that for you, right? And you just only get the net payout and never even have to think about like I'm kind of charging the right amount of taxes in like hundreds of countries around the world, essentially. Those are some of the things that speak against this. And let me now kind of talk about what speaks for this. And the way that I will talk about this is by talking through different use cases, or mentioning them, not really talking through them. One of the ones is, and that's kind of maybe a little bit goes against what I just said earlier, is monetizing the customers with the highest willingness to pay. Why does it make sense to focus on that user group? It makes sense because those with the highest willingness to pay might have the highest willingness to overcome that extra friction, right? I mean, so like if you're kind of a super fan of the product, you probably don't mind entering your credit card information. And also, if you can actually monetize them, charge them more because you're like unlocking extra content or whatever, unlocking extra functionality, the more you charge them, the more the like extra percentage or like the reduced commission or reduced fees that you pay for credit card purchases directly, the more that makes a meaningful difference. Second use case is rapid experimentation and conversion rate optimization. So here, there are of course ways to make it happen, but in general, you're going to be somewhat limited in the amount of experimentation that you can do in an app, where certain changes might just have to mean you ship a new version of the app, which is generally more overhead. You have to go through app review and stuff like that. Whereas on the web, you can ship different experiences like multiple times a day without a problem, right? So this kind of rapid feedback loop that you get on the web is, that's you can use that to learn from, and then maybe take some of those learnings and put them back into your app funnel as well. In general, you have a lot more flexibility, and that unlocks some things that you literally cannot do in the app. For example, let's say bundling subscriptions across different apps, right? There's no native way to really make that happen where you have one subscription across different apps. Which on the web you can bundle everything and anything that you want, even from different publishers. It's not a problem at all. Personalization as well. If you on the stores, you're limited in terms of the number of products, number of price points that you can charge. On the web, you can have a personalized price for every user. It's not a problem. You can do whatever. Personalized price, personalized contents of the package, not a problem at all. Also, doing things like running affiliate and referral programs is on the stores, that's really a problem to to do that effectively. And on the web, you have all the freedom of the world to do that. And then lastly, one of my kind of favorite use cases there in terms of flexibility is separating buyer and user. So my go-to example there is always, let's say you have whatever mental health or fitness app, and an employer wants to offer that app as a perk to their employees. On the store, there's no way to make that possible. Like the best that you can do is every employee buys that and then buys the app or the subscription and then gets reimbursed. On the web, it's easy to charge for, let's say 100 seats and then give that subscription to all the individual users. Next use case is CRM campaigns. We kind of alluded to that already earlier when we said that, now Apple's officially allowing messaging users outside of the app. So, this could be lifecycle campaigns, group campaigns with discounts, could also be win-back campaigns with some, for, let's say, churn subscribers, you send them a discount, stuff like that. And then lastly, there's some use cases in acquisition where I'm certainly not the expert on that, but web to app acquisition, where you basically run campaigns that land people on a web sign up flow. They sign up, they subscribe, and are only later then sent to the app. That's been a bit of a field of experimentation recently, and this also allows unlocking channels that don't even have an app installed product. So I think those are some of the use cases that where it makes sense to think about web payments. And then let me just kind of wrap this up with some best practices to think about web payments. So I think firstly, it's important to decide on use case. I mentioned a bunch of them, but then limit your implementation to that and don't try to build the be all end all solution immediately, because the complexity will still be high enough. So don't over engineer things. It's definitely worth considering to support Apple Pay, Google Pay, and or PayPal to increase conversion rates, because then at least you don't have to enter credit card details. For tax reasons, it might make sense to use a merchant of record, like Paddle, for example. And then, lastly, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't state to consider using a solution like Revenue Cat to help with the whole cross-platform subscription management aspect.
Got you. All right. Having said all that, how would you assess, or what does your gut feeling tell you about the general direction with the net purchases? Just kind of the outcome. Here to stay with small modifications, or what?
Yeah, so I think so my prediction would be that we will see further balkanization of App Store rules. So there's going to be more of these small decisions in different countries that allow this thing or that thing or the other, and I think mostly that's going to be meaningless to the vast majority of publishers unless they're very specific and very niche. I think commissions might be forcibly reduced. So Google is now down to 15% for all subscriptions. And I kind of would expect Apple to either follow suit soon or be forced to, perhaps even forced down to something like 10%. This is more of a feeling that this might at some point somehow happen, rather than having heard anything concrete. I don't think it's going to go much lower than that. And I think at that point, it really just becomes a very good deal for most developers in any case. I think Apple will likely be forced to allow third-party app stores, at least in the EU. So there's the Digital Markets Act, I think it is, that is kind of in draft stage currently. However, I don't really see any standalone third-party stores seeing big adoption. I think the bigger impact might be on kind of stores in apps or stores in the store, which is currently forbidden. So, for example, there's Microsoft's xCloud gaming, which was disallowed, which might kind of make a comeback in that case. And also, we could perhaps see some of the content fortresses like Facebook developing more app-in-app capabilities. So that's kind of more what I think might happen. So I think overall, I still don't see in-app purchases going away because they have that consumer trust and low friction, and I think will therefore remain the default option for the vast majority of app publishers. Got it.
So we'll see later on this year how it's going to, everything we just said will pans out. for me personally, is the arguably the most interesting part from all this confrontation between Apple and the government bodies would be Apple is making the case that the major reason behind keeping one app store as the only source for apps is security. They're not saying it's not they're making the case this is pretty much impossible to keep the same level of security when you're allowing everybody else. When I say everybody else, I mean other app stores to provide apps. Just take a look at Android, what's going on there. We know the difference in volumes of problems with security between Android and iOS. Well, on the Android side, every once in a while we'll hear the stories about, massive data breaches. But it will be kind of interesting and breathtaking to see if Apple can actually pull out the third option, allow third-party app stores, but still be able to provide the same level of security for iOS users. I just don't see it happening, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's security at multiple different levels, right? And I think this kind of stands and falls kind of with the how good is app review really? Because there's obviously various levels of security. There's a ton of security features baked into the operating system on iOS, and those would still apply even if you get your app from elsewhere. So then it's really about the app review, and of course there's been another interesting feature to watch this past year where a lot of kind of discussions on how effective is app review really at picking at finding the bad things and kind of sifting them out and while not making things harder than necessary for those with legit apps. And I don't think that at least I would say in the industry, the prevailing sentiment right now is probably not that app review is doing a great job at that. So, that's kind of why I don't see, I think, it's an argument that Apple has to make, I think, but I don't know that will convince regulators in the end. And will that make the platform overall less secure? Maybe somewhat, but I think that's going to be marginal, but mostly because I think that the impact of third-party stores overall will be marginal. Yes, will there be some people that get tricked into installing a third-party app store and then installing a malicious app from that app store? Probably. That's probably going to happen in this case. But again, it's probably not going to be a huge impact overall, I would think, on the ecosystem. At least that would be my assessment right now.
The app industry is vast. To navigate this space, you need a directory to look up suppliers and partners, and you need to know who are the best. Visit our marketplace directory at businessofapps.com/marketplace/podcast. And now, back to the show.
All right. We've reached that part of the show where we're done with the questions we wanted to discuss as the topic for the whole conversation. And there are just a few more questions I'm asking every guest on the show to give him a chance to provide a little bit of a better picture of who he or she is to the audience. Rapid, quick questions, just a few of them. What smartphone do you have now? Have you been switching between iOS and Android or staying one side all the time?
Yeah, so I think I would say I'm firmly team iOS by now. I'm quite locked into the whole Apple ecosystem. I've only had one Android phone, and that was way back in 2012. I've had more Blackberries than I've had Android phones, so that maybe tells you something.
Gotcha. Speaking of Blackberry, do you remember your first mobile phone?
Yes, that was way before BlackBerry. My first mobile phone was a Sagin, which is like a French manufacturer. It was quite big in Europe at some point. So I think this is like around the turn of the millennium. It was a terrible phone, kept losing power, but it was like the cheapo phone that I got as a teenager. And I think my favorite pre-smartphone phone would have been the Motorola Razr V3, which I kind of still have very fond memories of.
Got it, like Ford Mustang 1967.
Yeah.
So right now, imagine you've left your smartphone at home. What would be the most missing feature for you?
Yeah, I think probably messaging. I mean, like, there's just kind of, just staying in touch with people, with my family and stuff. And then beyond that, probably the thing the app that I open most often, when I'm out and about, is probably Twitter, just for distraction. So that would be the other thing.
All right. What about features, both software and hardware, that you believe your smartphone is missing right now, or there aren't any?
Yeah. So features that I'm missing. So I'll give you some some more attainable ones and some less attainable ones. The most attainable one, where I'm still baffled to this day that this isn't better supported, is multi-language support. So like the practical example there is, I don't know why Siri cannot speak two languages at the same time. Like I message and text in both English and German, and I can when Siri reads out my messages, I can either read out German messages, try to pronounce German messages in English, or the other way around. And I'm still baffled that doesn't exist. I use SwiftKey as my keyboard for the only reason that it allows me to easily type in two languages. So that's the most attainable ones. A few other things that I think would be neat. I would really love more a harder surface phone that doesn't get scratched so easily. I mean, I'm not one with always with a cracked screen or anything, but I'm around playgrounds a lot with my kids, and sand really does a lot of damage to phones, and I really don't like it that I always have to keep like this beautiful industrial engineering in a cover, because that's the only way to keep it somewhat safe. And then the last one, the last feature that I will mention, is the one that's least attainable. I'm really looking forward to having some kind of brain phone interface where I can just think something and it's going to show up on the screen. So often when I have my hands full or doing something, I'm like, I have this thought and I would love to write it down, but I'm not gonna get up my phone and type it out or whatever. So having something just straight brain to phone, that's definitely a feature that I'm missing, and I'm looking forward to the day that we have that.
I guess a Neuralink from Elon Musk will be able to do just that in a few years to connect the smartphone with you. Hopefully, via very uninvasive way.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm not gonna have my head drilled for that. I don't need it that desperately, but we'll see.
All right, great. Thank you. That was my last question. But before I let you go, how can people get in touch with you and get more information about what you do? Yeah,
so it's generally best to find me on Twitter. My handle is Mr. Jefago, so that's MRJEFAGO. And also have a blog where I blog mostly about product management and leadership, and that's at jefago.com.
Terrific. Thanks. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being part of our show. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Art. Bye.
And that was Jens-Fabian Goetzmann, Head of Product at Revenue Cat. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. We release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe. You'll be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review and comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.